Strange and mysterious lights hovering above East El Paso tonight. It looked like a UFO.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
These are genuine UFOs in the sense that no one's ever been able to explain what they are, but they happen. They're not fakes.
I never, ever in a million years would have believed in UFOs if I'd not seen it with my own eyes.
Question number 1. What is your opinion of these lights in the sky, or UFOs?
Why is it that Belgium, Mexico, the UK have recently released what were at one time top secret classified documents to the public, discussing and talking and revealing the presence of so-called extraterrestrial objects in our airspace?
75, Sirius is performing quite well.
If we only had 1 or 2 sightings per year, I wouldn't be talking about this. But I'll give you an example. In 1950, the year I was born, there was 1 sighting reported in the month of December. Fast forward to 2008, and we now have over 350 sightings all over the world. Can we at least agree that we may differ as to what is the cause of the phenomena? We can agree that UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. We were driving home, minding our own business, certainly not looking for UFOs. My wife was driving, I'm in the passenger seat. She looks up and she goes, "Wow, what's that?" I go, "What?" She goes, "There." I look up and sure enough, through the windshield, this large, very powerful light. First I thought it was an airplane coming at us, because when a plane comes right at you, you see that headlight, and it's very easily mistaken for an unidentified flying object. This thing didn't move, and my wife had to take her eyes off it, but she was driving. But I kept my eyes trained on it, and I began to notice that there were no blinking lights, that the thing moved. Well, after watching it for about a minute, a second light appears and slowly descends into the main light, and then the main light disintegrates in concentric circles. Well, that is something that is anomalous. I think we can agree on that. Was it a craft from another dimension or another solar system or galaxy? I have no idea. I can't say what it was. All I can tell you that it was an anomalous light. This kind of sighting has been reported for decades now all across the globe. We're also seeing what I would consider nuts and bolts craft, and I realize there are people who disagree with this particular theory or concept or position, but I believe that these craft are real. They are made in another dimension, and they are used to travel between this dimension and the second heaven, or this other dimension that these entities really reside in. Some of these craft are enormous. For instance, in 2007 over the English Channel, mile-wide craft were seen by 2 different pilots, as well as that same craft being shown on radars. Look, if it was 1 or 2 sightings per month, we wouldn't be discussing this, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds per month. And now when we look at the whole scope of ufology and realizing that this phenomena is not going away, it's time to sort of cast off the shackles of ridicule and fear and examine this thing head on and decide what paradigm works the best to explain the phenomenon.
Question number 2. What factual proof is there of UFOs?
People are always going, where's the hardcore evidence? Where's the facts behind the whole ufology? Well, some of this is really being obfuscated and deliberately obfuscated by the governments of the world. We know that certain countries like Mexico, France, Japan, Brazil, the UK, and Belgium, all have released what were at one time classified documents and now released that to the public, stating that this stuff is real.
Question number 3. Can you give an example?
Edgar Mitchell, a former Apollo astronaut, went on the record on Kerrang radio. And after he sort of announced it on Kerrang radio several years back, I saw him again on the Fox News channel with Sean Hannity on a sit-down one-on-one. And Edgar Mitchell's basically stating, look, Roswell was real. There was a crash and bodies that were recovered from Roswell, and our government covered it up.
Oh, yes, there's not much question at all. But there's life throughout the universe. We're not alone in the universe at all.
You're convinced that we're not alone in the universe?
Oh, I know for sure we're not alone in the universe. And I happen to be privileged enough to have be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet. And the UFO phenomenon is real, although it's been covered up by our governments for quite a long time. It is a real phenomenon, and there's quite a few of us that it's been well covered up by all of our governments for the last 60 years or so, but slowly it's leaked out, and some of us are privileged to have been briefed on some of it, but I've also been in military circles and intelligence circles that knows beneath the surface of what has been public knowledge that, yes, we have existed.
He believes that, like I do, that there is a cover-up. We just have a discrepancy in our world's view as to what's behind the phenomena. Again, he's extraterrestrial. I'm interdimensional, and specifically the fallen ones, fallen angels, which we read about back in Genesis 6, once again manifesting on the earth. So there is evidence. There's plenty of evidence. We've got the witnesses, hundreds, thousands of witnesses who have come on the record.
Question number 4. Are people interacting with UFOs now?
There's a guy in Vegas. His name is Prophet Yahweh. I've actually interviewed him. And his big claim to fame is one particular time he was able to summon a light in the sky, a craft, a UFO.
We met up with Prophet Yahweh, seer of Yahweh, at Doolittle Park off Lake Mead. We picked the day, we picked the time, and we picked the location. So we took him up on his offer, and we scanned the skies. Nothing but a few clouds. When the prophet started praying for a sighting, I wasn't exactly convinced.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting so that they know that I am not mentally ill. I am not a false prophet, like those who seek to kill me say I am.
I see something straight up.
Oh, brother, look at it. There it is.
You can barely see it, a white speck. Then another sighting.
There it is. I got it.
Photojournalist Jonathan Hawkins locks in on it. Let's take a closer look here. It's an orange sphere that appeared out of nowhere. I call the boss with an unexpected change in my story. I can see it clear as day. In fact, it's bright.
I can't believe this.
It's moving pretty fast.
It's going to Nellis Air Force Base. It wants to be seen.
We called Nellis to see what these things might be. Guess what? They didn't call us back. But this thing started coming back toward us. It's coming toward us now, I think.
What?
See, it's coming up toward us.
Whoa, man! Oh, hallelujah!
Then, a few seconds later, it disappeared.
It's going back up in space.
Prophet Yahweh isn't concerned. He says it'll be back.
And the camera people were just stunned. They were shocked. They couldn't believe it. This, of course, made national, international news and put Prophet Yahweh on the map. Just recently, there was an article, and I love the way they released this stuff after everyone's dead and there's no way to vet the story. Talked about Churchill and Eisenhower, and apparently Churchill knew of an encounter with a disc and a plane and put the kibosh on it, and both he and Eisenhower got together and said, nope, can't let this story go out. It's going to cause mass panic in the population, and it will make people leave or lose their religious beliefs. And so, you know, this happens decades after the fact. There's no way to call up Churchill or Eisenhower and ask them to vet the story. They're dead, as most of the witnesses are dead. It's one of those stories that comes out from time to time that hints at a deliberate obfuscation of the facts, not only by our government, but certainly the UK and other governments of the world.
Question number 5. What is going on at ESETI Ranch?
We know that another dimension may exist. We know this from string theory, from quantum physics. We know that from Einstein's equation that nothing can actually approach the speed of light. What happens after that? Jane, what did you see at the ESETI Ranch?
A UFO highway. Some were huge, some were small, some were green lights, some were red lights, some were yellow lights. I also saw fairies. Fairies are real. People, you know, look at cute fairies in books and whatnot, and they are malevolent. The biggest one I saw was like 12 inches. The noise was unbelievable from these little things. I have some pictures that are so clear you can almost see their toes.
Question number 6. What are orbs?
What we're seeing up in East City Ranch, and certainly other places, people are seeing these orbs. It's a global phenomenon. The question is, what are these orbs? And what is the source behind these orbs? And I find it very troubling that certain circles are embracing these orbs as something that's benevolent. They're in crop circles, above crop circles. It's a global phenomenon. People see them in the sky. Jaime Maussan's photograph of the Mexican UFO flap that happened in Mexico, where hundreds of these orbs are seen in the sky. They appear all over. It's a global phenomenon. In the United States, people see and record orbs. What are they? We're living in the age of deception. We can be so easily deceived. These orbs appear as balls of light. It's a global phenomenon. When the orbs come in, they'll come as different colors. They appear and disappear. They kind of flit in and out of dimensions, as it were. First they're there, then they're not there. Sometimes we see from these very bright orbs in daylight, very large orbs, we see other orbs coming and emanating from them, which then come back into them. Very, very bizarre, strange phenomena. What we need to understand and come to grips with is, just because I have a supernatural experience, just because I see orbs or something manifests like a UFO, or an entity begins to communicate with me telepathically, that doesn't mean it's a good thing. And it certainly doesn't mean we should embrace it. In my research, which has been going on for basically 30 years, I have discovered that people who have experienced this type of supernatural manifestation, whether it's telepathic communication by so-called extraterrestrial entities or the manifestation of orbs, there's always a doorway open into the supernatural. They have engaged in some sort of illicit behavior. You can only test the spirit or spirits, what's coming at you, from a standpoint of you haven't opened yourself up by illicit means to some sort of communication from interdimensional beings. Let me say that again a little simpler, perhaps. If we engage in necromancy, we've already crossed the line. There's no way to test the spirits at that point, in my opinion. However, if we have an experience, let's say, we're not engaged in mediumship or necromancy or fortune teller or Ouija boards or familiar spirits or talking of the dead, any of this stuff. We're not engaged. We're just walking along, and we have a vision, let's say. At that point, we can test a vision. Or if a spirit manifests and appears in the room, at that point, it's very easy to test the spirits. And the Guidebook of the Supernatural tells us and admonishes us to test the spirits, and there are certain ways in which we can do that.
Question number 7. What does the Guidebook of the Supernatural say about these things?
The Guidebook is rife with examples of the supernatural manifesting with mankind. And it also warns us of and gives us examples of how to engage, how to disengage, how not to engage, how to let's say fight against some of these adversaries which may come up against us. Yeah, the Guidebook is chock full of examples of this kind of fallen angels or even the good angels engaging us. The difference between them, when the fallen ones manifest, okay, it's always fear. It's always a fear-based deal, always fear-based, and it's also sometimes on the other hand that we hear that the fallen ones can appear as angels of light. So the angle here is deception, and this is why just because something may appear benevolent, it might not be.
Question number 8. Why do people feel the phenomena is benevolent?
People today have no paradigm, for the most part, on how to deal with anything supernatural. And so when they are pressed with it, when it comes into their realm of reality, they have nothing to grasp, nothing to hold on to. No paradigm in which to embrace this, for the most part. Oftentimes, people will look at the phenomena and just embrace it, just let it in. Just believe that, oh, it must be benevolent. And nothing, in my opinion, nothing is more dangerous than that. Look, we've got shows like Ghostbusters that are on. With all due respect to those guys, they're playing with fire. Now, they're protected on some level, but at some point in time, And who knows when that's going to be. They're going to cross the line and something very negative may happen. They're dealing with entities that are extremely powerful and malicious, malevolent, evil entities. And this is the problem. Unless unless a person knows how to test the spirits, knows what they're up against, and understands and realizes that our weapons in which we engage these entities are not carnal. What I mean by that, they're not guns and knives and fists and karate and all this kind of stuff. Our weapons must be of a spiritual nature.
Question number 9. What other phenomena is going on?
There's different aspects of the phenomenon. Not only do we have UFO sightings appearing all over the world, but we've got cattle mutilations, human mutilations, crop circles, so-called abductions, the so-called breeding program, and alien implants. Now I realize, if you have never heard or traveled in those subjects before, that can be like, you're kidding me. And yet just a modicum of research will show that the phenomena is real, burgeoning, and not going away. Let's take cattle mutilations. Cattle mutilations have been going on in different parts of the world literally for decades. Specifically, if we go to the southwest in the United States, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, we see cattle mutilations that go back literally 30, 40 years. Law enforcement has yet to bring one person, to charge one person with a crime. There's a MUFON investigator, his name is Chuck Zukowski. What he has discovered is the cattle, once again, are taken. Different parts of them are excised, removed from the animal with surgical precision. There's no blood left in the cattle or the particular carcass. They're usually dropped in the middle of a field, no footprints. While that might sound certainly bizarre, what we do have is the animals themselves, the carcasses, the remains. And we also have certain anomalies around the animal. We have where sometimes the grass in the area right around the animal won't grow the same way the other indigenous plants would be growing just a few feet away. We get spikes in radioactivity. We'll get spikes in electromagnetic frequencies.
It's really pegging here. If this was ghost hunters, I'd say that there was a spirit in there. So we're getting electromagnetic field coming from this area. Is there a tag in the ear? See if it's getting off the radio wave.
Whatever's going on is extremely bizarre. Again, no blood. Tongues are taken, ears, eyes, the jaws are stripped down of flesh. Sex organs are cored out. Anuses are cored out. Udders are stripped and taken. It's incredibly grisly and horrific. The bottom line is this. With all this going on, why dump it back into the rancher's field? Why would anyone do that? Of course, it's deliberate because what it creates is a climate of fear. A man living way out in the country with his family decides to go deer hunting, and he tells his wife he's going to sort of scope out the area, hops on his ATV and says, look, I'll be gone for a couple hours. A couple more hours go by and she finally calls search and rescue. They find the ATV rather quickly. It's where he said he was going, on top of this hill. What's bizarre is no signs of a struggle, no footprints near the ATV. It's been like he's just vanished in the thin air. What they do find is his shoe high up in a tree about 50 feet away. How did his shoe get there? 36 hours later, they find his naked body concealed in a thicket near the house. It's been drained of blood. He's like this, with his mouth open and like that. He's obviously terrorized. Next to him is a dead rattlesnake. There's no blood in the dead rattlesnake. The body was removed without a coroner being present. There's the first thing. The second thing is the family is not allowed to view the body. 2 weeks later, the body is returned to the family in a welded steel casket. Cause of death, cocaine overdose. The family, was absolutely taken aback by this because they knew the father, the husband, and there was no drugs involved. So something is going on. Someone some agency deliberately obfuscated the information, not only from the family, but from investigators who were trying to find out what really happened. And so I believe that some of this is really very much repressed. But we do have two cases, the one in Brazil, graphic photograph and an autopsy report, and the one in Pennsylvania. We need to differentiate between orbs and UFOs. Now, this is just a theory. An orb is not a UFO. I mean, it's unidentified. We don't know what it is. But in the classic sense of nuts and bolts, orbs seem to be more ethereal. They seem to be orbs of light and light only. They're not manifesting as nuts and bolts hardware like we have in the classic silver discs that are seen, or classic craft that fly by jets like at 10,000 or 20,000 miles an hour. It's a whole different deal. Orbs are different. When Prophet Yahweh summoned that UFO, I believe it was not a craft. I believe it was an orb. There's a difference there. When we showed photographs of orbs at Isetti Ranch, these are not UFOs. I mean, in the sense of classical dish-shaped craft, these are orbs that are floating by. When we showed you different pictures of men and women, and there's orbs around them, something is manifesting, isn't it? But it's not nuts and bolts craft. Something is manifesting, perhaps from another dimension. There are those who would say, well, there's something, dirty lenses in the camera or whatever. It's not what we're looking at here. Certainly the Isetti footage would show that, Prophet Yahweh. Obviously, something is manifesting. And so again, I would point to the interdimensional hypothesis as the paradigm that best suits what we're looking at. They flit in and out between this dimension and another dimension. And this is why it's important for us to differentiate between orbs and craft. When that pilot in 2007, two pilots in the English Channel and on radar, and they see a craft which is a mile wide.
The only person who saw this phenomenon, what were you? There were some passengers who saw it, and also another pilot.
Yes.
Simultaneously?
Any object from 50 miles away must have been fairly enormous.
What about a mile long?
It's possible, yeah.
Did it move at all?
It probably didn't move, but I had the great opportunity the other day from Jersey Air Traffic Control of visiting their radar room, and some interesting traces, let's put it that way, from the radar indicate that there's a possibility that they did pick up on, from both Guernsey and Jersey radar, traces, spurious traces they call, for around about 55 minutes.
How long did you see it for?
I saw it in total for 12 minutes.
When Ricky Soros in Stevensville, Texas, looks up and sees a craft.
This thing, it was above me about 300 foot. You know, the funny thing about it was flat, and I would have expected it to take off at an angle like this, but it didn't. And I was actually watching underneath, and when it took off so fast, if I would have blinked, I would have thought it vanished, but I had my eyes on it, and I know it took off flat at a 45-degree angle. These are not orbs. This is hardcore craft, and it's used to flit between one dimension and the other. And we also got a preponderance of physical evidence with the craft. We've got landing sites where there's pods in the ground. We've got spikes in radioactivity, spikes in electromagnetic field around certain areas where these craft have come down. And then we've got tens of thousands of witnesses who have literally seen cigar-shaped, triangle, pyramidal, and of course the classic silver disc. What's really interesting is that this phenomena is showing up not only in television and movies and books and novels and popular culture and video games. You pick up a music magazine and all of a sudden you realize that, oh my gosh, they're talking about orbs. They're talking about a psychic or supernatural phenomena. It talks about there were 10 to 12 grown men who experienced these orbs coming into the rooms or whatever, and they were absolutely terrified. The classic abduction scenario is simply this. You're laying in bed with your husband or wife, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You awaken out of a sound sleep. And the first thing you realize and you're aware of is that you're paralyzed and you can't move. The second is you're aware of a presence in the room. Somebody or something is in the room. You start to look around with your eyes and you catch in your peripheral vision
these beings, which are about 3 to 4 foot tall. You awaken, they're there. The next thing you realize is you're being levitated off the bed, which defies our physics, by the way. How can they possibly be doing this? You try to scream, find that you can't. You wonder why your husband or wife has not awakened also. And you're then floated through walls, windows, doors, unbelievable stuff. And I realize that from our perspective, it's like, what are we looking at? How can, this is defying and breaking all our laws of physics. And I would certainly agree with that. But again, who's ever doing this has either technology or they're moving in ways that we don't understand yet. So for the benefit of this discussion, the person finds themselves floating through the wall, and they're taken aboard some sort of a ship. They find themselves on a metallic table covered with a sheet. Their clothes are removed from them at some point. Then they are surrounded again by more 4-foot grays with the large head and the black almond eyes. And this is what we see happening. These people are taken against their will, and we see that genetic material, eggs and ovum and sperm are taken from these abductees. And again, it goes into some sort of a breeding program, which Dr. Jacobs has researched. When he first got into this, and I interviewed him for my book, The Alien Interviews, he talks about when he realized that these people weren't crazy, that he sort of went into a shock tailspin for 6 months, walking around saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, just trying to deal with the fact that what he had first thought was, let's say, a psychic break with reality or mentally imbalanced people or whatever. He realized that, in fact, the phenomena was real and that the end game is to create some sort of a human-alien hybrid which will look and pass as human. We're going to go and see a friend of mine, Dr. Roger Lear. Dr. Lear is a podiatrist and a surgeon, and he was drawn into the so-called alien implant removal. He's done about 16 of these surgeries, and they are absolutely phenomenal. We are going to get up close and personal with what these surgeries were and what Dr. Lear discovered when he took these implants out of human beings. What are we looking at here? I mean, I'm looking at, and I can see these like what appear to be implants. The skeptic's going to say, well, it's a BB gun or it's a wire from another operation. What are these objects we're looking at in the x-rays?
Well, I prefer really, Lynn, to take the skeptical point of view because I'm the one that's involved with it. So as far as I'm concerned, these are two cases in which there appears to be metallic foreign body. We don't know whether it's an implant or whether somebody picked up a flying nail. And these are two different cases. As you can see, this one appears to be in the joint, but it's really not. It's in probably soft tissue, is what we call a patellar tendon here. But this is an elongated object, and you can see it's metallic. And we know that it's metallic because in reference to the density of the bone, you can see that it's metal. This one here, these two cases, by the way, have not been done yet. These are pending surgeries that we'll do in the future. We use an X-ray device called a C-arm. And the C-arm is a live mobile unit, so that if you make an incision and you insert an instrument, you can see it as you're doing it. Wow. And it makes it a lot easier to locate the object and clamp it. Sometimes we found in doing these implant cases that the object moves.
I want to stop you there for a moment, because what you just said, I mean, you've traveled in this, you've witnessed it, but for the viewers who are listening to this for the first time, you just said the object moved. Can you clarify that the object moved away from you on its own power somehow? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. In these cases where you're dealing with a metallic object that's inside the body, you don't see anything from the outside with the naked eye. But when you insert an instrument in the tissue, most of the surgical instruments are stainless steel, and they're supposed to not have any kind of a magnetic field. But for whatever the reason, they seem to react with the magnetic field of the object, and it's as if two like ends of the magnet are towards each other, and the object gets propelled somewhere else. So we've seen this over and over and over again.
I want to get sort of the personal side of the story. When does a person, how do they first contact you and why? What is bothering that person that they would seek you out to begin with?
Well, they usually seek me out now. I mean, this is a drastic difference than when I started this, but we've done 16 surgeries today. So my name is known basically all over the world for doing this kind of research. But so when they come to me today, at today's date and time, they usually feel, number one, that they've been involved in the alien abduction phenomena, and that they have an object, or that they might have an object.
Okay.
What happened to you 20 years ago?
Oh, probably had a car accident, sighting. Learned quite a bit about God and the universe in a very short period of time. I feel to be a very fortunate man. And
Hi. Mike has been in on all these surgeries.
I truly understand the enormity of some of the statements I probably have made.
Yeah. Do you think that...
But I feel that... How do you put it? The truth will set you free, I guess. It's the only way you can look at it.
This was a patient who had one in the wrist. This came out of the wrist, and it's probably was 3/4 bigger than this piece. This piece is left. This one you should be able to get in.
That's very big. Where did that come out of?
This one, if I remember correctly, was out of a forearm.
Now, is that in a blood type serum? Or
this is it, yeah. This is in the serum from the patient. We find that they seem to be quite happy as long as there's some preservative that's like the human body that it came out of.
I understand you've got some scientific data on the alien implants. Can you explain that to us, please?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we do is we try and look at these objects from the outside in, so to speak. So when we've gotten the amount of data that we need to get from looking at the outside, then we go deeper into the object and try and get more data as we go through it. And one of the modalities for doing this is testing called an SEM and an EDX. And we're actually looking at one instrument, which is the scanning electron microscope.
SEM.
Okay. SEM. And the EDX is only a term for breaking it down to be quite simple, getting the definitive elements that the object is composed of. And for example, here you see that there are two very large peaks. And at the top of the peak, you see there's an FE. Well, an FE stands for iron. So we can tell that the most abundant element in these objects is the iron. So just from looking at that alone doesn't really mean anything. But when you go further through, some of the other graphs, if we were to come up, for example, where we're starting to see nickel in these graphs, and then the ratio of nickel, for example, to the amount of iron that's seen will give us a clue as to what kind of iron is this. I mean, is this something from Home Depot, or is this something from the Pleiades? So when we see a certain nickel-iron ratio in graphs just like this, we can say in most instances now that we know that it contains meteoric iron, because there's a specific nickel-iron ratio in meteorites. But one of the meteorites found on Earth, one category of meteorites, is a nickel-iron meteorite. Okay. The large meteorite strike in Arizona that created the huge crater was one of these nickel iron meteorites, and of course you could tell by digging through the fragments. So that's the elemental analysis, which is part of scanning electron microscopy. And the other thing, we can use it to take pictures. So we can look at a first few, maybe up to 10 nanometers, just below the surface. Or we can crank up the beam, so to speak, so you get a heavy bombardment of electrons, and we can start to take pictures that are 20 nanometers or 40 nanometers going down through the object.
What did the SEM show you that was anomalous regarding the implants?
We use the data and results, and we can see structures. Structures like carbon nanotubes. You can see this is a structure. And this happens to be a structure, we don't know what it is. So we find things down in the deep crevices of the metal on an atomic level, and they can be ovoids, they can be spheres, or they can have other shapes.
And these do not occur in nature, correct? These nanotubes?
These do not occur in nature, and they don't really occur in the natural process of metallurgy that we use to put, you know, unlike metals together and form a compound metal, which we call an alloy. So if we find an alloy of aluminum and iron, it would not look like this. This is something else. Now this is a very interesting one because it shows a line going across here, which is a definitive boundary line. And this is kind of interesting because you don't find in usual metallurgy metallic boundaries such as it's showing
Any
here.
idea what that might be used for?
The only thing that we can come up with is that there were two dissimilar elements that were put together for a reason.
If a skeptic were to look at the evidence, specifically the implants and some of the work that you've done with these, how would they refute them? Metallurgy, which was done off this world. Would you say that this is sort of a smoking gun? Could you call it a smoke? I mean, let me ask, I guess where I'm going with this is there any possible way that our government could create the nanotubes found in these implants, in your opinion?
I personally consider skeptics psychics. And I tell them, I say, well, you seem to know everything that there is to know about what I'm talking about or somebody else is talking about, but you never look at the data. So therefore, you must be psychic. So that's in reference to skeptics. Now, in reference to the rest of the question, the smoking gun. Yeah, I would say this is pretty much of a smoking gun. We do know, as I stated before, that black budget science is way, way ahead of academic science. But I tend to doubt, just on a personal basis from what I've seen, that they know how to do all these kind of things. Let's give an example. Let's say if they back-engineered alien craft starting from 1947, Roswell, which may have been crashes before 1947, but this one seemed to have a lot of attention. If they back-engineer that and we have a fleet of these craft that we've learned to fly and are flying around them, you know, we've had 60-some odd years to do that with. But does that mean that they understand the totality of what they back-engineered? I would, you know, take probably the best scientists, the best physicists that the world is able to buy and bet against it. It takes time for a society, even with hints, to grow to the point where you're able to use everything that an advanced society that's perhaps thousands or millions of years older, how could we catch up in 60 years or 100 years? So it's not logical. So when you say, yes, this is a smoking gun, it's a smoking gun from the standpoint of academic science. Here we have something you can put your finger on, you can look at it through a microscope, feel it, touch it, test it, and it doesn't come from here.
Fascinating. On a personal level, when some of these patients get these implants removed, what are they feeling? Are they feeling fear? Are they elated that they're removed? Just tell us about, on a personal level, what these people go through.
Well, most abductees are in a constant battle with themselves as to the reality of the situation. Many abductees would rather be diagnosed with a specific mental disease, which could be treatable, than to say I am the victim of somebody coming here from some society somewhere else and taking me against my will for some unknown reason and then doing something with my body. So, on the other hand, when they wake up in the morning and they've got a mark that wasn't on their body the night before, or they wake up and they have the feelings of the flu, muscle aches and pains, extremely thirsty, vivid memories of something that went on, or they wake up and they're not wearing the bedclothes that they went to bed with, then they are in a situation where they begin to wonder, was this a dream or is it a reality? And that begins to carry through. So in most abductees, and I've studied now hundreds, if not thousands of cases, this battle will continue beyond that of a metallic or non-metallic object that's in the body. One of the things that when they come to the realization that we have an x-ray of an object that was in my body that wasn't there the night before, it tends to push them towards the reality that yes, this is a real phenomenon. It's occurring to me, you know, in our real 3D world, not in a dream or some
illusion,
delusional dream state. So then they accept the reality, and then they have to decide whether they want to keep it or whether they want it out. So naturally, all the patients that we've done the removals on have wanted it out.
In your opinion, what do you think that these implants are doing? Are they perhaps changing the very DNA structure of an individual, or maybe they're tracking devices? What do you think about that?
I'm fairly well convinced that they are not tracking devices, and this is based on several interviews I've done with abductees that have had objects that did not want them removed. One was a case in Brazil who had 2 objects in a toe, but she chose not to have it removed. I lost touch with her, and I really don't know what happened. But she told me in discussing what these objects did, I said, well, you think it could be a tracking device? And she just laughed. I mean, she just gave me the horse laugh. And I said, well, why do you think that's so funny? She said, well, let me tell you. There was an episode with ETs in which they stopped a bug in mid-flight right in front of her in some kind of a beam of light or beam of energy. And they told her that they had the ability to track the DNA of that bug anywhere on this planet. So she said, do you think it's really necessary to have a device to do that? Well, that was some years before we, you know, geneticists, earthly geneticists, realized that each one of our DNA strands has its own electrical configuration. So if we were smart enough, and maybe someday we will be smart enough, all we have to do is build a receiver. If we build a receiver for your DNA, I could track you anywhere. So an advanced civilization using an artificial device to track you, I don't believe this makes any sense whatsoever. So what do these things do? Some think they could be behavior modification devices. I really came up with a pet theory. I think that since most abductions involve the taking of ova and sperm, that it's pretty safe to say there's some genetic effect that's going on. Now, Dr. David Jacobs thinks they're making hybrid beings to perhaps repopulate the planet in case some disastrous event occurs, or maybe for some other reason. I'm not saying he's wrong. There very well could be a plan to develop hybrids, and maybe there's hybrids among us.
But I think that the spectra of the phenomena is so worldwide and involves so many people all over the planet. I don't think that's the main objective of the group who's doing the most of the abductions. I think that it's more logical to me that they're doing something with our genetics, which they have probably done before. Because if you especially would know, if you look into the biblical history, there's things in the Bible that have all kinds of indications that people have been changed from time to time. Going back all the way to the story of the Tower of Babel.
Sure.
We build the tower, it goes up, God doesn't like it, and what does he do?
Confuses everyone's language.
He confuses the language. Well, what's the converse of that? If he confuses the language so that you can't communicate, and there were, some extensive geographical areas which had to develop, as we did, our own language, then how did we communicate before? But there are people that I have met personally that if there is such a thing as a hybrid, they sure fill the bill.
How would you describe that, elaborate on that for us?
Well, I can give you a classic example. I did last year, I think it was the Bay Area UFO Expo, and a tall fellow with sparse blonde hair came up and was sort of listening to one of our conversations and seemed to be very interested and so on, and one of the members of our group struck up a conversation with him, and in the course of the conversation he was asked, "Where do you come from?" He said, "Well, I came from a long way to this conference to hear, what you researchers have had to say." And it's, well, how far did you come? Well, I came from Colorado. And yeah, well, that's really great. What do you do? Well, I'm a computer electronics engineer. I work with the computers. And he was asked, he said, "Well, I guess you're probably a really good skier." And he said, "A what?" Skiing. Don't you go skiing? And he said, "What's skiing?" Whoa. Well, I think to myself many times, what would it take to convince the masses? Because it would have to, if President Obama came out on national television and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have something to tell you. This is one of the most important things that's happened to mankind. We now know that there are extrasolar planets that have life forms like us, and not only that, but we've learned that they are and have been visiting here for many, many years." I would predict that the following thing would happen: would people, turn the dial and find out what the score on the Lakers game is, or a craft, for example, about mass land. A craft comes down, lands at rush hour time in the middle of a Hollywood freeway. Talk about panic. Yeah, I think there really would be a panic, because people would be right away on their cell phones calling some division of the state, Caltrans, to find out when they were going to get it out of there so that they could get home, to watch the Rams. That would be the panic. That's it. So people are so entrenched in their daily activities. Okay, well, that's nice. We're being visited by non-terrestrials, but I still got to get up and go to work in the morning, and I'm lucky to have a job because, etc. So what would it take to really, show mankind that the most important thing in history is going on? Better than the president, I think, if Walter Cronkite was alive. And he came out on television, he'd have a better chance of convincing anybody than anybody else I know. So maybe it's only going to come if there is some kind of a mass, 1939 type landing, non-hostile, landing with people, constantly looking up. People never look up. They look down, or they look straight ahead. They don't look up. You have people, planes flying by laying chemtrails. And they look up and they say, oh, look, that's a nice thing that the airplane's doing. Must be cold up there because look at the ice crystals. Of course, that was laid down at 6 a.m. and it's now 5 and the sky's all cloudy. So, waking up the masses, that's the big question.
If the so-called extraterrestrial presence manifests, it will be what I would call a mega shift in human consciousness. It will change people's worldview and paradigms like that. We are told in ancient prophetic manuscripts that such an event will come in the last days. Implants are giving out radio signals, correct?
That's correct. The last few of them that we've done, since we had the equipment, we were able to detect radio frequencies, usually in the FM band, on a classified FCC chart, and found that this particular frequency was a deep space communications frequency, fixed or mobile. So that was quite of a shock.